Steve Carden, floor is yours, mate. Welcome to the Regional Council. I'm not sure how much time you require of us.
Well, I'm not sure how much time you'd like me to speak for. I'm sort of in your hands. Where do you want me to sit, over here?
At the front. Well, it depends how interesting you are, Steve.
Well, it could be a short conversation.
Well, firstly, I don't know you. I'm sure no one around here knows you. So can you tell us who you are, what your experience and what you do, and then this vision?
Right, okay. That's quite an introduction. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I'm the Chief Executive of a company called PAMU, which is formerly Landcorp Farming, the country's largest farming company. We're a state-owned enterprise. So I've been with the business now for about 6 years, and prior to coming to PAMU was running a business in Australia called PGG Rice and Seeds, focused on the pasture seeds business, and prior to that was in America with a company called McKinsey & Company doing management consulting, and have done a variety of social enterprise startups and high-tech startups before all that. So, I had a conversation with James Palmer, who said the council would be quite interested in hearing what PAMU is up to at the moment. I understand that a fair number of the issues that we are confronting as a large farmer in this country are issues that are relevant to your constituents. And
you're the largest, aren't you?
The regional of Hawke's Bay, correct. So look, I'm completely in your hands in terms of how you want me to spend this time. I've got a presentation here which talks a bit about what PAMU is doing, and it can be a 5-minute conversation or it can be a 25-minute conversation. It's entirely
Let's have your presentation. I'm sure people will be interested.
Perfect. Well, can you see the screen behind me? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let me give you a little bit of context as to who we are. As I mentioned, a state-owned enterprise. There is, of course, and for the last 6 years, there's been huge amounts of scrutiny and comment about why the government should own farming assets, and I'm not going to really delve into that conversation here today, but fundamentally we exist to create value for this country, and for us that means fundamentally enriching the land we're entrusted to look after. We look after about 1 million acres of land around the country. We are here to enrich our people, who are the primary focus for what we're about as an organisation, and looking after them. They are the ones who drive value across that asset base. And, it's particularly important to the board that we are here to enrich the future of farming for this country. We are the largest farming entity, and there's been, I would say, a huge amount of disquiet in the farming sector about what the future of farming looks like. I hear it from my farm staff, and I hear it from people across the industry. And our role is here to make sure that the future of farming for New Zealand is brighter than the past for farming. And that's a role and vision and mission that we take really, really seriously. Just a bit of sort of context. We've been around for 130 years, and our fundamental role throughout that period of time has been land development and evolution. And that's an old photo of us clearing pristine native forestry back in probably the 19th century, late 19th century, and converting into pastoral uses. We have had a role of land use and creating productivity off our land, fundamentally. And during the course of our existence, first as a Lands and Survey Department, and then more recently as a commercial enterprise called Landcorp and now PAMU, we've created a lot of farmland in this country. In fact, 26,000 farms have been created out of the Lands and Survey portfolio across the country. And more recently, that land conversion's taken on a new shape, and the land conversion and the role that we play as an organisation has changed as the requirements and realities of our environment have changed as well, and I'll touch on that very, very shortly. Just so you can see what the portfolio looks like, you can see that it spreads throughout the country. We have the second largest dairy herd and the largest sheep, beef and deer herds, flocks around the country, and we farm in every single region of the country except for the Taranaki. We don't farm on the best land for the most part. We struggle at times with the land that is remaining in our portfolio, but we do our very best to drive the best commercial return that we possibly can, and that I get held accountable to. We've also got a large forestry portfolio, and that forestry portfolio is growing, and it is growing in the Hawke's Bay region, which is an area of focus for us and a point of controversy, it's fair to say, for our farm staff. We're more than just a farming company, and I sort of want to touch a bit on what we're actually looking to do to evolve and change our business. Yes, farming is the core of what we do, But we've done a lot over the last few years to really build on the knowledge and know-how that we have as an organisation to do more than simply worry about what's happening on our farm portfolio. We've got a large farm management software business called Farm IQ that we're investors in. We've got the country's largest livestock genetics business that we own called Focus Genetics. And increasingly we're looking at ways in which we can partner with others to take our products and connect them with customers and consumers and in markets around certain parts of our product portfolio. We don't want to be exposed to the vagaries of being a commodity producer, trying to survive as the lowest cost producer, producing valuable products that we only get paid a commodity return for. So we've looked for ways in which we can get paid fundamentally more for our products by producing products that are differentiated and of high value, and I'll come back to that in a second. Now, just by way of context, and you guys will know all of this, there is nothing new to what I'm about to tell you, but farming is confronting change in significant ways, as every industry is. But it feels like we're getting buffeted with change from many, many different angles. This is our old model of food production and farming, and it's been a really successful one. And Palmer Landcorp Lands and Survey has been good at doing this, and that model has been changing from one land use to another, and typically that means intensifying. So it's meant cutting down trees and putting animals on that remaining land. And then when you've done that, figuring out ways in which you can put as many animals per hectare as possible on that land to produce more meat and wool per hectare of land. That has been our model. We've been very good at it as a country. But it's reached a point where that model doesn't work as effectively as it used to, and there are lots of constraints to that model working in the future. The first and foremost of which is it's put a tremendous stress and strain on the people who work in the sector. We've had great difficulty attracting good people into the sector. We've got an ageing workforce. We don't have young people coming into farming. We have a terrible health and safety track record as an industry. We're paying a lot of people near to or below the minimum wage based on the number of hours that they work. So we haven't been a good industry necessarily at looking after the people who are the lifeblood of our industry. The second problem with our constraint, of course, with our model has been all the externalities that farmers rely on to be successful have come under pressure. I think it's fair to say that our cost of producing the food off our land has not been accurately reflected in all the assets we draw on to produce that land. So the soil's become degraded in many parts of the country. We have issues with air, not least of which is our methane emissions. Biodiversity has been diminished, and water quality has been substantially degraded through our farming and intensification model. I think the farming sector knows that and has woken up to that reality. What we're after now are solutions for how we can farm in a sustainable way that enhances rather than degrades those natural assets. Then, of course, we are confronting climate change. I just heard the back half or back quarter of the conversation you've just had. And this is proving a growing concern for us, putting aside the existential threat that climate change is to humanity. We are seeing our business change dramatically because the climate is changing around us. The seasons are changing, biodiversity patterns are changing, the disease spread is changing across our business. And we are recognising that we are going to have our business quite substantially impacted by how climate change is impacting the broader operating environment for farming. Reflecting all that is growing consumer concerns in the supply chain where our food goes, that they expect to have much more transparency around what's happening, how our food is being produced, and the care with which we're taking to produce food that is worthy of being sold in these international markets. So whether it's KFC, McDonald's, Burger King getting pressure from investors, or it's customers at Costco or Tesco demanding to see full traceability, carbon footprint, the nutrient loading of our products, whatever it is, we recognise that people are putting more and more of a spotlight on the food that we're producing, and we're being held to account in a way we haven't experienced in the past, how we're producing the food rather than just the food that we are producing. People's expectations about what animals should be doing and how animals are to be raised are changing quickly. People don't like seeing photos of animals stuck in mud. They don't like the idea that bobby calves get killed as part of our dairy system. They are concerned about the way in which animals are treated when they are shorn, when the wool is taken off them. These are realities. We're used to them as farmers, But people's expectations as transparency grows about how food is produced and people look through the supply chain, their expectations around how they want the food to be produced is changing, and that's having an impact on our farming systems, how we need to produce food. Then, of course, on the other side of the equation is the significant changes that are happening from a demand perspective. We have a global health crisis emerging in parallel with a climate change crisis around obesity. Type 2 diabetes is going to be the single largest causer of death globally, from a health perspective, overtaking cancer and heart disease in the next 10 years. And so that's forcing quite a significant rethink on the sorts of food that we're eating, how much food we're eating, where it's going, and how much is being wasted. And of course, it's not surprising that people are starting to scrutinise both the environmental cost and the health profile of foods that we're consuming. And we're seeing a substantial growth in plant-based foods, which as the country's largest animal producer is going to have a material impact on the longer-term demand for our products over time. So I'll just pause there to say nothing in any of that is new to anyone here. I recognise that, you guys get it, but I'm just restating that these are all the competing factors coming into a business like Palmer, which is trying to
We get it, we're just pleased that you get it as well.
Pardon?
We're just pleased that you get it as well.
Yeah, well, I think people are quickly waking up to this fact. What it does mean is for a company of 1,000 people like Palmu, most of whom exist on farm, there's a huge amount of uncertainty, disquiet and fear amongst our farm staff about what the future of farming looks like. Sitting there with their families looking out over these farms that they run very well and take great care and passion in running as well as they can, and there is uncertainty about what the future of farming holds. And will they have a farm? Will their lifestyle, will their home, the local school, the local community be the same in the future as what it's been in the past? And those are not easy questions to provide answers to right now, frankly. And so we're trying to shape and present a picture of the future for our farm staff, which gives them hope about what the future of food production and farming looks like. So let me just really quickly touch on what we are doing, because it's really easy to point out the problems. It's much harder to come up with the solutions, as we all know. So the first thing we're trying to do is to create what we call resilient farms and rural communities and change the dialogue internally about what good farming looks like, and not present it as a trade-off between efficiency and the environment, but very much but presented as a win on both fronts. The most efficient, long-term, profitable and resilient farm systems are those that work in harmony with nature, not against it. Work to create great places to work and live, not create places where there is exploitation of staff. Enhance the well-being of animals, not exploit the well-being of animals. And we're far from producing the answers to those farm systems, but we're starting to get some ideas about where they might exist. So it's a combination of doing different things. First off, we're really focused on the health and well-being of our people. We've got to put that at the front and centre of what we're doing. So we've had a big push on health and well-being, mental well-being, looking at how we can reduce pay equity differences amongst our farm staff, and fundamentally put in place a career in farming for our people that enriches and enhances what farming means for them within our organisation. We've seen for the first time in a long time a drop in the number of people who are leaving our organisation. We used to have a significant churn of people coming out, and for the first time ever, in the 6 years I've been there, we've seen that drop substantially, as I think people now recognise that they have a place, that they are recognised and valued. The second thing we're trying to do is to use technologies to rethink how we're farming. And the picture in the middle is an example of cow collars that we're trialling on some of our South Island stations, which use GPS technology to keep animals within boundaries rather than using physical fences. So we have a large high country portfolio of properties. The economic cost of fencing those is prohibitive to keep those animals out of the waterways. So we're trialling these technologies as a high-tech solution to keep animals out of waterways without the prohibitive cost of fencing. That is one example of a lot of quite exciting technologies that are coming through, which I think are fundamentally going to change the way in which we can farm. Working smarter, not harder, as we tell our people. The Internet of Things, big data, is going to have a huge impact on farming. We've seen it in the large row cropping systems in America. We're starting to see it now in the intensive pastoral systems that we're used to. And the third thing we're doing is we're experimenting with new farm systems. New Zealand farmers are fantastic at innovating around farm systems, but we're looking quite hard at quite alternative farm systems, which are quickly becoming the norm. We've got a growing portfolio of organic farms across our dairy network, and we've got a growing portfolio, small at the moment, but growing, of regenerative farms. And the exciting thing for me is that we're finding that the financial returns of these farms is better than the conventional, as is the environmental outcomes, as is the number of hours that these people are needing to work, and the amount of stress that we're putting on our animals. We seem to be able to design systems, I think, at this point, that tick all the boxes.
What's a regenerative farm?
Well, regenerative farming simply focuses our attention on rebuilding the natural organic matter within our soils. So we don't dump a whole lot of nitrogen fertiliser on there. We look to diversify the pasture species we're using. We look to capture more carbon in our soils. We're looking to increase our planting to provide more biodiversity, increase bug and insect life and activity. It's about trying to create regenerative systems that regenerate the natural ecosystem rather than try to create these monocultural systems we've had in the past. It's relatively early days, but I'm quietly confident that New Zealand farmers, because we're good at this stuff, can recreate farming systems that are actually going to achieve the outcomes we need to be resilient farming systems and communities in the future. And I think Pāmu, as a large-scale farmer, has a role to help innovate in that space. Come back to that. The second thing we're trying to do, as I mentioned, is figure out ways in which we can get paid more for what we do. It's one thing to drive costs down in your business, but eventually you reach a point where it's hard to continue doing that sustainably without exploiting. So we're thinking, how can we get more on our top line? So we're working really hard across our meat, wool and dairy portfolio to try to figure out ways in which we can get paid more through partnerships. So whether it's wool and surfboards with our partnership with New Zealand Merino and Firewire around our wool portfolio, or the stuff we're doing in dairy to create what we call differentiated milks. Now this slide got a little bit too much detail and the formatting's come out funky. Apologies for that. But essentially what we're trying to do on our dairy portfolio is come up with specialty milks. So I don't expect as a farmer to get paid anything more than the neighbouring farmer if I'm producing exactly the same milk as a neighbouring farmer. What we are keen to do is to figure out ways in which we can produce milk that is unique and that people value. And our farm systems now are set up in a way that we can pretty much develop grass-fed or organic or antibiotic-free, GMO-free, palm kernel-free, no bobby farm, A2 milk, high protein fat milk, whatever our customers design or desire, we can produce that milk for them. And what we're finding is more and more processors from Synlait, Meraka, Open Country and now Fonterra are happy to pay premiums for milk that is special. So we want to be producing and developing farm systems that allow us to produce special milk because there are premiums for that. And often you can do so without incurring costs within your farm system for doing it. A2 milk attracts a premium, and all we need to do is DNA test our cows and put an A2 herd together. We get an A2 premium. Organics is much more challenging, but there's a much bigger premium on the other side. And so what we've done then is taken these specialty milks and started to develop a portfolio of products that we're taking through to the end consumer across 3 species. So we've got a cow milk portfolio, which is now taking organics into the Chinese market. We've got a sheep milking business, which is taking sheep dairy products into the Asian markets, in a joint venture called Spring Sheep, and we've developed dairy milk, which is producing dairy milk products for the Australasian and Hong Kong food service industries. Restaurants love dairy milk. And we've partnered with a cosmetic company in Korea called Yuhan to produce the world's first dairy milk cosmetics. Now, the great thing about these farm systems is because you get paid such a substantial premium, because they are different milks, you don't need to work as hard to drive costs down. You can actually come up with farm systems that are less intensive on farm, producing high quality milks that get a paid a premium. This has got to be the future of New Zealand farming. Differentiated products that attract a premium that don't require us to continue to intensify to drive down cost, which is the old model. It's hard work, it takes time, it's expensive, it's not without risk, but I think it's the only way we navigate through these challenges we have about sustainable food production systems in the future. bore you with all these products, but this is what we're taking into market. The third and final piece, so we're looking at resilient farm systems for our pastoral portfolio. We're looking to take our products close to the consumer and get paid a premium. The third thing we're doing is changing our land uses. And we recognise that we don't need to put hooves on every single hectare of land. We can put more roots down. And we are developing now, for the first time in our 130 years, horticulture programs across our farms and growing our forestry portfolio. Yes, there's a benefit to doing so from a carbon capture perspective and a carbon valuation perspective, but we're trying to do it in a way that enhances our pastoral operation rather than replaces it. And here's an example from our GPS mapped farms. This one is a Marmari farm in the Northland, and it provides a view of what sort of today's farm looks like and what the farm will look like in 2040. And because we can't get a high resolution GPS image here for you, it looks like we've covered everything in trees, but that's not actually the case. What we are doing, yes, is retiring some of the less productive land up the top into either production or native forests. We're increasing the planting around our paddocks on the more productive lands to increase biodiversity, but we are carefully intensifying our better quality land on our farms to increase the overall economic performance of the farm and improve the environmental performance. We do get carbon income, we get forestry income, but we're actually looking to intensify on the better land our pastoral activity around new farm systems to drive overall productivity and profitability across our farm systems. This is about farm redesign. It's not about just taking entire farms out and putting them in trees. It's about using trees to enhance profitability and environmental performance. And we're really confident that we can do that on our farms without losing staff numbers, we think.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you're planting and what your rationale is?
Yeah, well, we've got a right tree, right place philosophy, which is all about trying to identify the right species of trees on the right land, get the right economic and environmental outcome. We work very closely with our partners, PF Olsen, on doing that, and it's done on a, per hectare basis. So it's done very, very carefully. Our mix at the moment across our forestry portfolio is still about 70% exotic and 30% native, which includes a Manuka development and plantation program. But for the most part, it's all about trying to get that balance between biodiversity, soil stability, carbon capture, and overall farm income.
How do you protect the young trees?
Peter.
Sorry.
Sorry. Steve, you got much more to...
I've only got literally one more slide. How about I just wrap up? As I mentioned, we're doing a lot in the horticulture space. We're starting very small, but we're looking at horticulture opportunities across some parts of our portfolio. It's nowhere written anywhere that we need to always just farm animals. So we are looking to diversify our land use and look at a range of alternatives. We've got our first hemp plantation underway, which is exciting.
Like hardcore dope to me.
What's that?
Oh, nothing.
It's on the East Coast, isn't it, Steve?
They haven't got the
It's
good
not on the
hemp
East
here.
Coast, actually, no. And we're learning. We've grown the plants. The hemp plant crop has grown unbelievably well. We harvested the seed. We then went into harvest the fibre. Hemp's an unbelievable fibre, which is why it has so many potential uses. And we drove the harvester about 10 metres into the paddock, and it got clogged up with the hemp stalk. It's so strong.
Amazing.
So we're learning a great deal about what we do with our plants. But, in summary, I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot happening in the farming sector, but a lot of change is coming. But it's good, positive change. And I think the farms 10, 15 years down the track that our farm staff and the private sector farmers are farming on are going to be much better places to farm than they are today. I'm excited about what farming looks like in this country. It's going to be hard for us to make that transition in the next 5 to 10 years. There are some challenges, but I'm really excited about what the future of farming looks like because we're changing in a way that's positive and sustainable.
Thank you, Steve. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. No, we don't. If you want, we'd love you to stay for a cup of tea and certain, because that was an incredibly good presentation. And if we have questions, this council will go on for another hour on questions.
I appreciate it. Sorry.
So I just, as a wind-up statement, I would just say...
Well, no wind-up statements.
When you're the chair, you can have a wind-up statement, mate. It's tremendous to have someone of your calibre and your vision running our big state farms and leading the way, really. We need people like you, and we need people like PAMU. I'll get used to that organisation, leading the way in our farming, and you're thinking about the issues. And it's a great pleasure to have you here today. So we'd love you to stay for a cup of tea, and I'm sure we can have a little bit of extended smoko break. These councillors will want to ask you a raft of questions. So thank you very much.
Good time. Appreciate it.
And we'll stop for a cup of tea.